So, next on my agenda, before we talk about blesses and whatnot, so we're gonna get back to those later. I'm gonna talk to you about the different types of pretenders there are, right? Because Dominion's pretenders are essentially broken up into four types. We have immobile pretenders, titan pretenders, monster pretenders, and mages. So immobile pretenders are going to be guys like the Statue of War, right? He's actually a statue. That means he can't move anywhere. Typically, he just sits in your base and doesn't do anything. If you're taking an immobile pretender, it's usually because you're going to take a major bless. When I say major bless, that means you're going to put 9 points into one of your magic paths. And this gives your sacred units a special bonus. We're going to talk about what all the different bonuses are and why they're good and what they're good for later. But suffice it to say that immobile pretenders are particularly good at doing this because they typically don't cost very much and they have a high amount of magic pathing, like 3 paths, right? So, what's another guy who's... Any of these guys have 3? Yeah, like Statue of the Underworld is a great guy to take for getting 3 death. He only costs 190 points as Dominion 4. Now, Titan pretenders are like the actual kind of godlike pretenders, right? We've got all these people are like inspired by Greek gods. Look, we got Zeus right here, Titan of Heaven. This is pretty obviously Zeus. They have like 2 to 3 magic paths. They are big. They're fairly hard to kill, but they're not quite badass enough that they can just go and kill an army by themselves. So you've got guys mostly from various different mythologies. I'm honestly not familiar with everybody here other than like the Greek gods. Like this guy is Hades pretty clearly. It's got its nice helmet of invisibility, all that fun stuff. So Titan pretenders are what you take if you want someone who isn't going to get killed very easily by assassins or an unlucky crossbow bolt, and you want to get a little diversity in your magic pathing. Like, I might take the Anunnaki of Growth and Rebirth, and maybe I'll get like 6 nature magic, 4 earth magic, and if I want to get another path in here, it's only going to cost me about 60 points, so I can get like 5 astral magic. And it's fairly complicated why you might want to take like a particular set of magic paths. This one is sort of common because 4 earth and 5 astral means you can build these magical boosters that will allow you to get up to very high astral magic and craft these like rings of wizardry and sorcery and all that fun stuff. And those are very good for breaking into a ton of magic paths with summoned mages and all this other stuff. So I could summon the Fairy Queen's Court with Nature 6, and I could take this guy on like a nation that maybe doesn't have any of these magic paths and break into them very hard and give myself access to powerful spells and all these paths. It's not something I've done very often on many nations, and I often feel like it's a bit overrated, but it's definitely something you can do. And on certain nations, they're so limited in the magic paths they start with that it's something you really want to do because you don't have any other choice in the late game other than to try to do something new that your opponents aren't going to be well prepared for. Middle Age Ulm is a great example of a nation that needs to do that. They have a very strong early game, they have a very strong mid game, but then after a while, they can't really do anything new or fancy if you get more research and go into the late game. They don't actually get anything that they don't already have. And this is not a very good position to be in, and so you need to break into unusual magic paths that people aren't going to expect you to have and try and get some new strategies out of that. And so that's a reason to take a Titan pretender. The next set of pretenders are the monsters, which starts right about here. This pretender screen is actually organized into immobiles, titans, monsters, and then mages down here. So, like this guy is actually an immobile monster pretender, the Demi-Lich. He's immortal. If someone kills him, he doesn't actually die as long as he's in his own dominion. And, you may remember that Death 3 immobile up there that cost 170 points, and this guy only cost 130, and he only has 20 points for new magic paths. So, where's that guy? This guy, Statue of the Underworld? Oh, it's 190. The Demi-Lich is better than the Statue of the Underworld in almost every way, other than only having 3 hit points. That doesn't really matter since he's immortal. And this is kind of like a unfortunate thing about the Dominion's meta when I'm making this video. I don't know if this will change in the future, but this section of pretenders, these monsters, are mostly better than the Titans and the Immobiles and the Mages. if you can play a nation, or any nation that can play a monster pretender and be happy about it, right, and get the pathing that their nation Nathan wishes they had while getting a monster pretender, is kind of at an advantage at the moment. It varies a bit between different nations, because if a nation was very weak before and then they made this change where you can get the Great White Bull and get a lot of benefit out of nature and earth magic, you're still going to be kind of a weak nation. But often you want to look through these guys and see if there's a good monster pretender that you can take. Because a lot of the monster pretenders are freakishly cheap and freakishly powerful for how cheap they are. Like this guy that costs 60 points, has 2 magic paths, has 1, 2, 3, 4 attacks, and berserks, and has high protection. He's just, this guy is a beast. There's various reasons why I wouldn't take him on a lot of nations, because he gets crippled over time, but he's still quite good, and there are uses for him. So, the last thing we have is... I should actually tell you a bit about what Monster Pretender's typical role is first. Excuse me. They typically only have like 2 magic paths or 1 magic path that they have like 2 points in. They tend to have a lot of hit points. They tend to actually be monsters. There are some exceptions, like this guy is just some dude, right? Telking, God King, right? Or this Melkart, which is they're giants. Yeah, they're giants, demonic giants. The monster pretenders tend to be actually monstrous, like dragons and giant bulls and manticores and stuff like that. They tend to be fairly capable at combat, fairly hard to kill, often will have flying or regeneration or other special abilities, and they tend to be fairly cheap as far as point cost goes. They don't have a lot of investment in magic paths or dominion candles. Something I should probably have mentioned earlier, right? See where it says Dominion 4 here? That's how much Dominion you're going to start with if you pick this pretender, right? This is the minimum Dominion you can have. Now, you may remember that I said you only really need like 4 or 5 points of Dominion on a lot of nations. And so that means that these guys are kind of overkill, right? If I start with the Celestial Griffin, that's 2 points of Dominion. I can just pump it up to 4, right? I'm already there. Now, something you should remember is that when you're investing in magic paths or Dominion, the cost is from wherever you started, right? So for advancing from 4 to 5 points, if you started with 4 points, is the same cost as advancing from 2 to 3 points if you started with 2 points. Follow? So that means that advancing to 4 to 5 is very cheap. But because of how much magic paths and scales and such cost, there are some pretenders that kind of fall into a really nice pattern where, I can get like so many scales, right? Let's just pump it up, right? And it's a lot of like 10 points, right? That's a little bit too much. So I go down, and then I've got all these points. I get up to 5 in my magic path right here, right? So I've got, what is this, 6 scales, and I've got 6 in a magic path, and he's awake, so he can go out and fight stuff, and I have 5 Dominion candles. But, the thing is that going from 4 to 5 tends to leave you at an awkward position. This guy actually comes out pretty well at 3, but if you're doing, there's a variety. Excuse me. Let me rephrase that. You're gonna have to pick through various pretenders and try and find certain ones that happen to have a good point cost and for whatever you're trying to do. And let you end up with only like 3 points remaining or 8 points remaining, and it falls out pretty well. And oftentimes, some of the higher point pretenders will have points left over for Dominion candles that you don't really want. You'd like to have, say, a little bit more points left over from someone who had a lower base cost, like this Earth Serpent at 130, or the Myrmicillion at 60 points, so that you could put like, 1 more point into scales or something like that. And you kind of get stuck spending it on Dominion, because what you'd really like to do is have a little bit more points floating free, use some of them to get up to like 4 or 5 Dominion, and use the rest to do other things. Alright, so that's why monsters are unusually good right now. I probably shouldn't have gone into that too much, but it's important to know, at least at this point in the game, and if it changes, I'll update the video. So, we're going to talk about mages now. You should probably never pick any of these heroes. I'm not sure how the Master Lich... Oh, that's right. Ghost King and Master Lich are both counted as monsters. Serpent King to the right. Just these guys down here. These are the mages, right? So the classic ones available to everybody are like the Archmage and Crone and these people over here. So let's look at like the Great Sage. He's one of the better ones. So why wouldn't you want a mage like this? Well, the Great Sage, there's actually a couple places that might use them, but most nations don't want to use them because when you get magic diversity, when you get like 4 fire magic, right? What's a good use for that? Well, you might want to cast flaming arrows in a battle, and that'll give your army a big advantage. But the Great Sage can't do that. It's too risky. He only has 10 hit points. You'd have to like cover him in magical items. And even if you did, you'd be better off covering some Titan who has 90 base hit points in magical items. Like what if your opponents cast Earthquake, or if they cast Rain of Stones, which is another battlefield-wide spell that deals damage to everybody, and your Pretender dies. Your Pretender dying is very bad. They lose 1 in every magic path. So what that means is that these guys who are really good at taking a bunch of magic paths, let's start with like Frostfather, right? He's great for path diversity. So if I want to take like 2 in every magic path, that's actually pretty affordable, with Frostfather. I can take him dormant and get my 4 Dominion, right? And I got a pretty good scales here, actually. So the thing is, though, if he dies, he's going to lose, how many magic paths are there? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 magical paths? Well, what if I brought, well, it's not the Solar Disc, Lord of the Desert Sun. What if I gave him, like, 6 fire magic? I'm going to cast some big, fat fire spells later. It's a little bit too high. 5. Yeah, and then I have my 3, 4... there we go. So I got a pretty low Dominion, but whatever, right? So I want to go bring him in, and he casts some big fire spells. Well, if he dies in combat, and I manage to bring him back, you can have your priests slowly revive your Pretender. I managed to bring him back. He'll be at 4 fire magic and 2 nature magic. The nature magic loss is kind of unfortunate because you could have gotten some neat stuff out of nature by having 3 or more, but I can still do flaming arrows. I can still do big fire spells. I can give him a couple boosters especially, and I can still craft boosters for fire magic. He'd have to die twice for me to really have him ruined, and I wouldn't have nearly as much I could do with him at this point. So you don't lose nearly as much by getting one of these guys killed, and they're really, really hard to kill. I mean, 90 hit points, you can give him some gear, equipment, and he's going to be very, very tough to get rid of. And, for some of them, like the Solar Disc, right? Solar Disc isn't nearly as tough, but he's got flying, and if he decides he needs to run away from a battle, he's going to be very successful at it. None of these guys have flying. They're very slow, they're just going to die, is what's going to happen. Also, they only have 1 point of Dominion, which even though you only might want 4 right now, unless you're playing some odd nation that actually wants 1 Dominion for some reason, and you're gonna try some crazy, unusual strategy for that, it's not really that helpful, right? 2 Dominion is just pretty good. 3 Dominion is pretty good. 4 Dominion is kind of excessive because it's so cheap to get to 5, but you barely want 5. So these guys are mostly pretty bad. Let's see, the couple nations I might make an exception for would be like Lemuria or Middle Age Ulm, actually. I might get one of these guys to get a lot of path diversity so I can do some unusual things people might not be expecting. So that's a very odd possibility of doing that, but even then, I suspect that other options like the Master Lich, who's he's immortal, he's got more hit points, he's very tough, he's a monster, or I think there's some other options like the Phoenix or other monster pretenders would be a better choice for that, or even occasionally some Titans. This is not the total list of pretenders. Different nations have access to different pretenders, and there are some better options for those nations possibly among the Titans and whatnot. So that gives you the different types of pretenders and kind of what they're used for. The immobiles are for big magic paths or a lot of scales. The Titans are for a little bit of magic diversity while keeping them tough so you can bring them into combat. The monsters are combat guys. You might actually expand and kill entire independent provinces with them. You can bring them into combat, and they're also very tough. They're kind of flexible like that. If you don't want a lot of path diversity, but you want 1 or 2 strong paths, they're fairly good options because they tend to be even tougher than the Titans, and they usually have about 2 magic paths. And the Mage Pretenders are for if you want a wide variety of magic paths, like possibly every single magic path in the game, but I would not recommend you actually do that. That's just what they're intended for. Let's see if I've forgotten anything. Yes, there's this one other thing I should mention is that a couple nations, like Late Age Ulm, have a specific requirement, right? They only really have one good strategy, or they have one very strongly best strategy, and it requires you to take a pretender, so they get access to some special national spell or some non-national spell that's incredibly crucial and works really well with them. So like Late Age Ulm has a very, very powerful national spell that lets them summon vampires on the cheap, and vampires are immortal, and they have good magic pathing, and they can fly, and they're sneaky. They're great, great units. But it requires you to have a Death Blood crosspath, and Late Age Ulm doesn't get that. So you have to take a pretender that is going to give you access to a Death Blood crosspath, right? And you need Death 3, Blood 2, right? I think that's right. And you might actually want more than that in each of those paths, because there's some boosters and things you can build that are very useful to the nation for various reasons later on. And so their pretender selection is really restricted. There's like one or two pretenders they can pick for that purpose that are way better than everything else. So there's a couple nations that are going to have stuff like that, where you're going to really want a pretender for their national spells or national summons or national item crafting or whatnot, and it's pretty limited. And they basically are there to craft items or do those specific rituals. So I guess you could file them under magic diversity, but I wouldn't normally. So there's one last thing I need to cover in this video. We have actually covered almost everything you know to make any nation in Dominions, and actually do it pretty competently. And that is Major Blesses.